In our top stories tonight, Barbados' permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Elizabeth Thompson, has tested positive for COVID-19. After a brief work stoppage at some polyclinics, the Public Service Ministry and trade unions to have weekly meetings. No guarantee the drop in chicken prices will be reflected at restaurants. And in sports, the BC Air preparing behind the scenes for a 2020 season.
Newsnight Headlines was brought to you compliments Omega XL.
Broadcasting from our studios in the Pine St. Michael, this is CBC Newsnight, starting now.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Broom. Thanks for joining us. In our top story tonight, Ambassador Elizabeth Thompson has tested positive for COVID-19. According to a release from the Government Information Service, the ambassador traveled to Barbados yesterday afternoon from New York, which is the epicenter of the COVID outbreak in the United States. She has no symptoms of the disease and is feeling perfectly well. Ambassador Thompson arrived on a private jet and was tested at Paragon immediately after her arrival. Her positive result was returned this morning. Now, there was one other passenger on the plane who tested negative. Ms. Thompson came to Barbados to be at the bedside of her 95-year-old mother, who became gravely ill with a non-COVID-19 related heart condition. Given the gravity of her mother's condition, she was allowed to go to her mother's bedside. Since going to her mother's residence, the ambassador has had no contact with the members of that household other than her mother. Ms. Thompson was wearing a mask from the moment she got off the plane and has been practicing physical distancing. She will, from today, go into isolation at Harrison's Point. Despite not having contact with members of the household, the Ministry of Health is taking the usual precaution of testing family members. All precautionary measures and protocols are being observed. The Ministry of Health says it will continue to deal with this situation as it has all other cases in Barbados. The Ministry of the Public Service will be meeting with the various unions weekly to discuss any industrial relations issues and to ensure better communication across the various ministries. This was one of the major decisions coming out of a meeting with Prime Minister Mia Motley, Health Minister Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, health workers and representatives of the National Union of Public Workers at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Centre this morning. The meeting followed the decision by some doctors, nurses and other staff at various polyclinics across the island to stay off the job earlier today. Minister Bostic says the work stoppage happened as the island deals with the COVID-19 pandemic and had to be dealt with swiftly, and the issues that were raised have been resolved.
And if there's one thing, certainly from the Ministry of Health's perspective, that we will have to correct is the chains and channels of communication, so that all of the information gets down to the bottom, so that all persons are kept in the loop at all times. And I think once we do this and we meet regularly with the relevant stakeholders, that we should be able to resolve all issues over the next coming weeks or months. But a lot of things have been dealt with already, but have not been communicated directly to the persons involved.
Acting General Secretary of the NUPW, Delcia Burke, says communication was indeed the issue rather than things not being done. She says the matter of appointment of environmental health officers and nurses at the polyclinics was also discussed. She says the appointments have been made and are effective from May.
The problem with the locums who are temporary doctors who have some issues which were discussed today and which will be sorted out as soon as possible. And then there were other issues relating to the geriatric hospital. Those issues are also being worked on or have been worked on, and therefore will be communicated to the nurses and the other staff at the geriatric hospital.
Ms. Burke says the problems at the geriatric hospital were related to the distribution of personal protective equipment, sanitizing materials, and an area identified for placing people in quarantine. She says all of these issues have been dealt with. 2 new positive cases of COVID-19 have been recorded, bringing the national total of cases in Barbados to 90. This after 163 tests were conducted yesterday by the Best dos Santos Public Health Lab. The 2 new cases are a 58-year-old Barbadian woman who arrived in the island yesterday and whose case is under investigation, and a 42-year-old crew member of one of the cruise ships off Barbados who was transferred from the ship for emergency medical treatment. The number of people in isolation is 15 and 68 have recovered. 7 people have died. A total of 4,167 tests have been completed so far. Well, government's new COVID-19 directive has allowed for barber shops and salons to reopen. However, there are some measures that need to be taken. In tonight's edition of Coping with COVID-19, we take a closer look at barber shops and salons in the COVID-19 era.
Tonight's edition of Coping with COVID-19. If you've been growing an unwanted beard or you've been seeing far too much new growth for your liking over the last couple of months and you're happy to get back in the chair, please listen carefully. These are some of the things you should see at your next visit to the barbershop or salon. First of all, it's important to ensure that everyone working in the shop is healthy. Service providers must stay at home if they have possible symptoms. Upon entering the workplace, all persons must wash their hands or have them sanitized. While in the shop, everyone must wear a face mask. Service providers must wear a face shield when servicing clients. It is recommended that service providers wear disposable gloves when dealing with clients and change gloves between each customer. The number of people within or outside the establishment at any one time should be restricted in order to ensure that a distance of at least 6 feet is maintained between them. All sinks in the workplace should have antibacterial soap available as well as paper towels. Establishments are asked to consider discontinuing hand relief treatments as well as scalp, neck and shoulder massages during this time. Customers should be asked to be upfront about if they have experienced any symptoms connected to COVID-19 within the past 14 days. The safety and health of the team members and other customers are not to be taken lightly. As far as possible, salons and barbershops should see clients by appointment only and should consider scheduling online or by telephone. It is recommended that clients wait outside until it is time for them to be served. Personal protection equipment such as gloves, gowns, drapes, linens, and eye coverings should be changed between each client. These used items should be cleaned and disinfected or discarded in a closed container. Employees should use protective neck strips around the neck of each client receiving a haircut. Clean and disinfect all work area surfaces, including electrical appliances, and don't forget the cords. These are some tips to help you cope with COVID-19.
A local educational specialist is suggesting offering scholarships to get more students and parents interested in technical and vocational qualifications. Dr. Ida Medani, who is chair of the Education Reform Committee, says many students have intelligences that are not currently being catered to. She believes it's absolutely necessary to restructure the education system.
We focus on allowing children to do CVQs, but then we give all the scholarships for K. So therefore, we have to restructure the system to give some scholarships for those CVQs as well. If that happens, parents will say, well, I can allow my child to do something like this because it is being valued.
Local fast food giant Chefette has described yesterday's reopening as a huge success. The restaurant chain had been closed since April 3rd as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Managing Director Ryan Halut says they were humbled by the very large crowds at Chefette locations across the island yesterday. He says approximately 2/3 of the brand's 900 staff complement have returned to work. Chevette is also in talks with the Barbados Workers Union to allocate as many hours as is feasible while still following the COVID-19 recommendation framework for food establishments published by the Barbados Government Information Service. Dozens of British and European nationals stranded in Barbados are being flown home on 2 special British Airways flights this week. The airline is using its services to Heathrow after regular commercial flights were suspended due to COVID-19 travel restrictions. The first of the 2 one-way flights left the island this morning, and another is expected to leave tomorrow. British Airways, along with Virgin Airways, have suspended their regular services to and from Grantley Adams International Airport. There's a suggestion the majority of public service vehicle operators are complying with government's COVID-19 protocols related to limited passenger numbers and the wearing of face masks. It's coming from the Communications and Marketing Officer for the Alliance Owners of Public Transport, Mark Haynes.
The vast majority of workers out there right now are in conformity with the COVID-19 protocols. I have seen it with my 2 eyes. I've gone around, I've seen it. Masks are being worn. Drivers are keeping the numbers at the 6% capacity. I am not going to get into other matters where persons say otherwise, because I can't speak for every single one, but those whom I have seen and those who I always encourage them to do the rightful thing, follow the laws of Barbados, and this is a law which has to be complied with, and for most part the sector is complying.
Well, Mr. Haynes adds this is commendable.
They already are suffering from not getting their rightful share, and it's now cut to 60% capacity, and coupled with it, which means the figures are further down. So this puts pressure on them. While I'm here with you, I still urge the workers in the sector to be of good behavior, to comply with the laws and regulations of Barbados, to obey the police and the transport authority and all officials, and do not be rude and do not be obnoxious. I'm not imputing that many of my members are, but wherever that behavior is, I'm asking for persons to desist from so doing.
Well, police are investigating a fire of unknown origin which occurred at the corner of Gibbsland and Grisette's Road in St. Michael that destroyed 2 derelict houses. The fire, which started just after 10 on Sunday night, was extinguished early yesterday morning. In addition to the destroyed houses, the insured home of Philip Brathwaite, situated next door, also sustained damage. 2 other families who live behind one of the destroyed homes were also forced to vacate their home due to heavy smoke and the threat of the fire spreading. About 70 primary school students took part in their first conversational Spanish class yesterday, thanks to the Argentine embassy. Argentina's ambassador to Barbados, Gustavo Pandiani, conducted the first lesson, which lasted just over an hour. During that time, he taught the students basic greetings like welcome, hello, and thank you. The ambassador says the main objective of the class is to help the children start learning a second language, which will be a necessity in the world going forward.
We know that the world is going to change after COVID-19, and one of the changes that is coming up is that everybody has to be ready to start new work opportunities, and for that, to know a second language is going to be vital. Prime Minister Motley has been very clear about the need of everyone in Barbados, especially young people, to learn a second language. So we are ready from the Embassy of Argentina to support the decision of Prime Minister Motley and Minister King to give the Barbadian people opportunities to learn more than English, a second language, and if it is possible, a third language.
National Library Services facilitating the sessions, and Culture Minister John King, under whose portfolio the service falls, took part. He reminded the students Spanish is the second most widely spoken language in the world, and while it will make them more attractive to the job market, learning another language is also personally enriching.
Research has shown that young children are ideally suited to learn a second language as the language center of their brain is still developing. That means I'm out of it. And this makes it much easier than trying to learn it later on in life. I understand that bilinguals tend to be more creative thinkers, show greater reasoning and problem-solving skills than those who speak one language. Our Spanish classes for children will significantly improve your child's cognitive abilities, optimize their learning potential, and provide numerous personal benefits, such as being able to communicate with someone in his or her language and build lifelong friendships.
Well, more young children in the UK now have a chance to learn about Barbados. The opportunity comes through a recently published children's book, The Adventures of Amma and Kwesi in Barbados, in the sparkling rainbow teacup and saucer. The book is written by British author Joyce Osei, and with family hailing from the parish of St. James, she says it celebrates part of her heritage.
My grandmother is from Barbados and my granddad was from Ghana, but they met in England. And I've been to Barbados a couple of times, and I have such wonderful memories of meeting my family when I came to Barbados, and had some really wonderful experiences. So I thought, well, I'm going to start with that. I'm going to start with my heritage. And I did some research. There wasn't many books about Barbados. So I said, definitely, the first one, they're going to go to Barbados.
The book was published at the end of February, and while restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic have prevented an official launch in the UK, she's hoping to do so eventually and have an event right here in Barbados as well. In the meantime, following a great response to her first published work, Ms. Osei is working on some poetry and a follow-up to The Adventures of Amma and Kwesi.
This has been phenomenal. I went to the local school and shared the story with year threes. So they're all around about sort of 7, 8 years old. And the response has been absolutely phenomenal. Everybody, every child always wants to go to Barbados. By the end of sharing the story, they all want to go to Barbados, and they either want to find out more about breadfruits or find out more about coconut water or something like that.
Here is a tip from Cooperators General Insurance.
This tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
Teaching children personal responsibility builds their confidence as they learn to do things for themselves. This parenting tip is brought to you in association with Parados, Parent Education for Development in Barbados.
The Caribbean Union of Teachers, or CUT, says it is deeply concerned about the decision taken by CARICOM Council for Human and Social Development, or COSOD, on education for regional students to sit the Caribbean Examination Council administered exams in July. The meeting was held virtually and chaired by the Antigua and Barbuda Education Minister Michael Brown. At the end of the meeting, it was announced that the Barbados-based CXC would be setting exams for students in the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate, or CSEC, and the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Exam, or CAPE. The CUT, however, believes the decision taken places the lives of thousands of students and teachers at risk, as all the issues surrounding the administering of the examinations have not been addressed. Antigua and Barbuda's Chief Health Inspector has given the okay for limited school reopening. They will welcome candidates for CXC examinations tomorrow. We hear more in this ABS TV report.
Chief Health Inspector Shaban Martin gives her assessment after inspecting 3 schools Monday ahead of Wednesday's reopening for CXC candidates. Markings in the corridors at Princess Margaret Secondary School to help students maintain 6 feet distance apart. Principal Colin Green says the school developed a COVID plan since the start of the outbreak. The school nurse will take temperatures as students enter the compound before they're directed to a hand washing station. These faucets shut off automatically, so there's no need to touch the valve after washing your hands. Green says classes are limited to 12 students to ensure social distancing protocols are enforced.
Each table and chair has been placed 6 feet apart. The teacher on site will maintain that. The child on entry into the classroom will be required to sanitize their hands before they enter.
He says once class ends, the cleaners will sanitize the desks, chairs, and floor before the next group enters. Green says 2 classrooms will be used for isolation and classrooms not in use will be locked. Similar protocols are being set up at Clay Hall Secondary School.
Despite the supply chain disruption, at least one Jamaican manufacturer is still exporting product. As we hear in this report from TVJ, demand is high and the company is working overtime to fill orders.
These workers have been asked to work overtime to get these boxes of tea bags to overseas consumers. Marketing Director Joel Harris explains that demand for the product has increased significantly since the global outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Harris admits that he's not sure what is causing the sudden uptick, but he had this theory.
Persons want to be able to be healthier, right? And of course we don't guarantee any claims, but persons are using it to treat symptoms. So persons who have a cough, they may take a ginger tea, right? Persons who know about serosity for detoxing, they take our serosity, for example. Persons who drink the peppermint is good for, clean up the sinuses, as Jamaicans would say. And persons are saying we need healthier products.
Currently, about 70% of the company's sales are made overseas. The marketing director explains that the recent increase in demand is specifically from the North American market.
We have seen aspects growth in Florida, for example, in New York, in Texas, LA. There are some of the states that we have been seeing increasing demand for our products, for our herbal teas.
And demand isn't the only aspect of the company that's growing. Despite the harsh economic conditions, the company has employed more staff during the COVID-19 pandemic.
We're averaging about 25 to 27 persons on staff and payroll, and now we're up to 32 persons. 32 persons, and that's just a testament of the nature of our business and the opportunities that have arisen from COVID-19.
And sports is next with Anne-Marie Burke.